Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to COS at Home. Hello, Aaron.
Where's the Bible?
Where's the Bible? It should be in your bed. Okay, go check it out.
Where's the big Bible?
It should also be in your bed. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Welcome to another COS at Home. I'm your host, Jonathan Viot. Thank you so much for joining us for another exciting program. And yes, when we say at home, we mean at home, where your toddler can come running in and talking to you as she's getting ready for bed. Tonight, we have a 2-for-1 special regarding actions you can take from the comfort of your own home to advance the COS mission, as well as the answer for another great question from our Minutemen mailbag. For our interview segment of the program, we will be joined by the founder, president, and CEO of Moms for America, not to mention a COS supporter, Kimberly Fletcher. Really looking forward to that conversation. But folks, if you would, I think it's important here before we get started to just take a moment and to acknowledge all of the families that are currently suffering from Hurricane Helene that devastated the Southeast late last week. The stories that are coming out of this are just incredible. So if you wouldn't mind just for a moment, if you would bow your head and pray with me for all the people that are being impacted by this. Lord, our Heavenly Father, please bless all of the family members and people that have been displaced by this storm. We know that you are great and always great, and we know that all good things can come through you. And so, Lord, I ask that you please look over these families, provide them with your comfort and your mercy. Please help them to give them the strength to focus on what is most important, that they are here with us. And please comfort the families that have lost loved ones during this terrible tragedy from this natural disaster. And Lord, I also ask that you please bless all of the first responders and men and women from various nonprofit organizations that are deployed all across the Southeast, trying their best to help these people. Please watch over them and protect them. Lord, we ask all of these things in the name of your Son, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you so much, folks. Well, welcome again. And for anyone that is new to the show and new to COS as an organization, I'd like to take a minute to say again, welcome to Convention of States. We're a grassroots movement focused on the goal of utilizing Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution to call a convention for proposing amendments to the Constitution that would reduce the size and scope of the federal government, impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, and place term limits on all members of Congress and federal officials. In order to hold this convention, we need 34 states to pass our resolution, and to date, we have 19 states that have done this. So welcome aboard. Thank you for getting involved. Now, let's go on over to 5 for 5. All right, so tonight for 5 for 5, we wanted to remind you about the Article 5 Scholar Series that we launched. And this was launched on Constitution Day, and each Tuesday for the next 12 weeks, a new video will air on all COS social media accounts. These are video versions of essays written by Article 5 scholars such as Robert G. Nadelson and Michael Farris. The videos, they're easily digestible, perfect for sending to legislators or to family or friends, anyone that may want to go deeper or understand some of the topics around Article 5, such as the 1787 Convention, the Necessary and Proper Clause, the history of amendments in America, the progress of Article 5 scholarship, the rules of a convention, and much more. Tonight, we have a clip from the video of Michael Farris's piece, Solution as Big as the Problem. Check it out.
Solution as Big as the Problem. Michael P. Farris, Convention of States Action, Senior Fellow for Constitutional Studies. We see 4 major abuses perpetrated by the federal government. These abuses are not mere instances of bad policy. They are driving us towards an age of, quote, soft tyranny, unquote, in which the government does not shatter men's wills, but, quote, softens, bends, and guides them. If we do nothing to halt these abuses, we run the risk of becoming nothing more than, quote, a flock of timid and industrious animals of which the government is the shepherd, unquote. Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America, 1840. Number 1, the spending and debt crisis. The national debt is staggering, but it only tells part of the story. Under standard accounting practices, the federal government owes trillions more in vested Social Security benefits and other programs. This is why the government cannot tax its way out of debt. Even if it confiscated everything, it would not cover the debt. Number 2, the regulatory crisis. The federal bureaucracy has placed a regulatory burden upon businesses that is complex, conflicted, and crushing. Little accountability exists when agencies, rather than Congress, enact the real substance of the law. Research from the American Enterprise Institute shows that since 1949, federal regulations have lowered the real GDP growth and have made America poorer. Number 3, congressional attacks on state sovereignty. For years, Congress has been using federal grants to keep the states under its control. Combining these grants with federal mandates, which are rarely fully funded, Congress has turned state legislatures into their regional agencies rather than respecting them as truly independent Republican governments. A radical social agenda and invasion of the rights of the people accompany all of this. While significant efforts have been made to combat this social erosion, these trends defy some of the most important principles. Number 4, federal takeover of the decision-making process. The founders believed that the structures of a limited government would provide the greatest protection of liberty. Not only were there to be checks and balances between the branches of the federal government, but power was to be shared between the states and federal government, with the latter only exercising those powers specifically granted in the Constitution. Collusion among decision-makers in Washington, D.C. has replaced these checks and balances. The federal judiciary supports Congress and the White House in their ever-escalating attack upon the jurisdiction of the 50 states. We need to realize that the structure of decision-making matters. Who decides what the law shall be is as important as what is decided. The protection of liberty requires a strict adherence to the principle that power is limited and delegated. Washington, D.C. does not believe in this principle, as evidenced by an unbroken practice of expanding the boundaries of federal power. What does this mean? This is not a partisan issue. Washington, D.C. will never voluntarily relinquish meaningful power, no matter who is elected. The only rational conclusion is this: unless some political force outside of Washington, D.C. intervenes, the federal government will continue to bankrupt this nation, embezzle the legitimate authority of the states, and destroy the liberty of the people.
That is just incredible craftsmanship there from our amazing producer G. And I think these videos are really going to make a game changer for folks who are trying to get the COS message to people who may be wondering what they can learn or if they want to dive, or like we talked about. So these videos will range between 5 and 8 minutes. You can see the rest of that already on our social media account. And again, they're going to be debuting every Tuesday throughout the fall. Make sure you don't miss them. I know I'm going to make sure that I don't. All right, so now let's go ahead and hear about the latest COS news from the aforementioned legend, Producer G, with COS Now.
What do we want? When do we want it? Now!
This Constitution Week, citizens from across the nation participated in the Grassroots Article 5 experience. Hosted by Patriot Academy in Central Texas in partnership with Convention of States Foundation, the event trained citizens on how to operate in a legislative setting, as they discussed ideas for constitutional amendments that might be proposed in just such a fashion at the real Article 5 convention. Patriot Academy President Rick Green, Tim Barton of Wall Builders, historic reenactors, and Mark Meckler were on hand, and they even appeared with the crowd on the TV show Flashpoint.
We got a lot of Flashpoint Army here, Gene. A lot of Flashpoint Army in the room.
We're excited to be with you tonight, Gene. It's not only the nation's birthday for our Constitution, but obviously fourth birthday for Flashpoint. I love them.
They would be surprised, too, that the states have never yet used their power under Article 5 to intervene. When the feds find loopholes in the Constitution, this is the means we were given to close them. The states can and should fortify Washington's boundaries through this process.
On Article 5 Day, September 15th, Convention of States President Mark Meckler spoke with Pete Hegseth of Fox & Friends about what the Founding Fathers would do if they were here today.
The Convention of States Action is a group demanding Congress call a convention under Article 5 allowing Americans to propose amendments that will impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, amongst other things. The people get a say under Article 5 of the Constitution. Explain to our viewers what Article 5 Convention of States is and where you are in that process.
Yeah, so Convention of States is an organization designed to use, as you said, Article 5 of the Constitution. It takes 34 states to call for a gathering of the states, with the purpose being to rein in an out-of-control federal government. We can do things like impose term limits, not just on Congress, but on staffers and bureaucrats. We could impose a balanced budget amendment. We could limit the Supreme Court to 9. We could do away with a variety of federal agencies, all of it through the constitutional amending process. Today, there are 19 states that have called for such a convention. We need 15 more to get to convention.
Well, if you're looking for something where you can fight for the future of our country right in your own backyard, look at Convention of States. Mark Meckler leads it. It's a great organization. Appreciate you, Mark. Thank you.
Meanwhile, Convention of States is pleased to announce a new endorsement from Nevada Lieutenant Governor Stavros Anthony.
States to check what the executive branch and Congress at the federal level can do. I am in full support, and I completely endorse the Convention of States action in the state of Nevada.
COS volunteers continue to earn local media coverage, including letters to the editor in Illinois and New Mexico. Convention of States teams have recruited hundreds more patriots to the movement during the Tucker Carlson live tour. Here's some photos from those events, including in Florida, Arizona, California, Colorado, Utah, Oklahoma, Missouri, Kansas, Wisconsin, Texas, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And now, you're up to date with Convention of States.
What do we want? When do we want it? Now!
And so many exciting things going on across the country, as always, with Convention of States. I want to give a thank you to our buddy Pete Hegseth over at Fox News for having Mark on to talk about Convention of States on Article 5 Day. Really exciting when we're able to do those kinds of things. And I know it's not easy to get it on during all of the crazy news things that are going on. So big shout out to our buddy Pete. Congratulations to all of the grassroots activists that were part of the very first grassroots Article 5 experience. And a thank you to Convention of States Foundation for putting that on. And I got the impression that this won't be the last one. So if you were not able to be a part of it, be sure to be on the lookout for those in the future. And of course, all of our activists that were out at the Tucker Tour, all of those events, all 16 events over the course of September, they did an amazing job gathering petition signers. And also, many people expressed an interest in volunteering. So I think our ranks are going to grow because of their efforts. So well done to all of our activists on that. Now, there's one thing that's not covered by Producer G in that video, and those are the results from some national polling that we recently conducted. And I'm excited to announce that the results will be released later this week. How's that for a tease, huh? And I'm not holding out on you. Even I don't know the results from these polls. So I'll be looking out for them just as much as you are. But I wanted to let you know that those are going to be coming, and we're excited to release those. All right. Now we have the great pleasure of welcoming the founder, president, and CEO of Moms for America, not to mention a strong supporter of Convention of States, Kimberly Fletcher.
Hello. It's great to be here.
How are you, Kimberly?
I am good. I am just off the Tucker Tour, so I've been a little exhausted. Well, they were at everyone. It was different people at everyone. I was at everyone. It was great to see them, though. I kept going up. I kept going up and telling them, okay, well, Pennsylvania was really good. Oh, I don't know. That Wichita one was the best.
And what? So before we get started, tell us, what was your experience from or your takeaways from being on the Tucker Tour?
It was absolutely fantastic. So we had a great opportunity to meet with all kinds of moms. Our focus is moms, obviously. And we registered about 300 to 350 moms at every single event. We had a texting button that was up at the top. Highly recommend you guys get involved in the next one. It's going to be in March. And we right there we were able to call to action, and we had about between 700 and 1,000 moms who signed up on our text at every event, and then they flooded through the email. We were able to reach millions of moms through the texts and the social media posts. And the Tucker team was like from TCN. They were like following us around, hounding Debbie, as they kept saying, Debbie K, who's Debbie K? Moms for America. Because she was posting all this stuff backstage, and they're like, we're posting your stuff, keep doing it. So we're kind of doing their job for them. But it was fantastic. And the people we met, the relationships that we had, it was well worth it. And they're guys, there are way more of us than there are of the people who want to destroy the country.
That's awesome. Well, it is an honor to have you joining us tonight, so thank you for being here. Now, I typically ask first-time guests to tell us their COS story. But for you, if you don't mind, I would like for you to first tell our audience a little bit about yourself and Moms for America, and then you can share with us when you first learned about Article 5 and Convention of States.
Sure. So Moms for America was founded in a living room in Dayton, Ohio, with 27 moms in 2004. So we've been around for 20 years. And it was a slow, if you will, was 9/11. My husband was stationed at the Pentagon on 9/11, and through a series of God-given miracles, he came home safe that day. And it changed me. That was the day that I realized the price of freedom up close and personal, and I was willing to pay it. And I went from being patriotic to being a patriot, and I've been on the front lines of freedom ever since. So 3 years after that, I founded Moms for America, and we grew, like I said, incrementally. In 2017, we had the Moms March for America as a counter to the Pink Hat Brigade that descended on the nation's capital, and we had millions of moms who tuned into that, attended live or tuned in 4,000 cities, 23 countries. It was incredible. And that kind of got us on the trajectory where moms, that was the first aha moment for a lot of people where they're like, what is going on? And then we got involved in the Kavanaugh hearing at confirmation the next year, and it just kept growing. And then in 2020, because of all the things that we put in place, I ran for school board in 2003, realized what was happening. I studied the Constitution, I studied communism, I studied a lot of these historic things that people don't pay attention to. And so I saw a lot of these things happening, and really started exploding around during the Obama years. And so we started putting all of these things in place to help moms understand the true story of America, what their rights are, where they come from, how to effectively exercise them. And in 2020, when all the moms were like, oh my gosh, she's not a helicopter parent with a tinfoil hat, they started flooding to us in droves and wanting to know, how can we protect our kids? And what happened with the masks is it started tentacling between everything else, all these tentacles of what it touched. It wasn't just the masks. It was what was in the books, what was being taught in the classrooms. And they started to realize we're about to lose our whole entire country. And they wanted answers and solutions to how we can stop that. And the Cottage Meeting Project and the different programs that we have, they empower them. And that's our whole threefold mission: empower moms, promote liberty, and raise patriots.
Excellent. And so when did you first hear about Article 5 and Convention of States?
So the first time I heard of Article 5 was when I studied the Constitution in 2000, was it 2002? And I went through all the articles, and I read the Federalist Papers. I just did a lot of research on it. But I didn't think it was like a real thing that could happen until I met Mark Meckler during the Tea Party days. And we had partnered with Tea Party Patriots on a couple of different things, and we were highly involved in the Tea Party movement. And it was just a couple years later when Mark left, and he started this Article 5 thing. And at first I was like, huh, that's kind of cute. I wonder if that'll really happen. And then it was, I guess, 2016, 2017 timeframe when it started to really get teeth. And I was like, oh my gosh, this could be a real thing. So I was a Salem radio host in Omaha, Nebraska, and I had several people on talking about a convention of states and what would that mean. And my whole thing was, we have to educate the people, because I was like kind of a little bit terrified of a whole bunch of people who have no idea what their role and responsibility is sitting in these legislative bodies, getting together and talking about something they'd never picked up. And I was like, okay, first is I'm going to have a seat at the table. Second is we're going to make sure we're going to educate as many people as possible. And if the moms know, if the families know, if the people of this country know that you can get rid of something like the 16th Amendment, that you can get the government back, and if they know that this is a possibility, then they're going to want to do it. So we need to educate and inform them, but then we also need to have a path for once they're educated and informed to actually do something to get it done. And so it was, I guess, 2018, I had Mark and all these different people come on my radio show and talk about what is the Convention of States? How does it work? How can you do it? And I started to see a pushback from somebody about it. And one of the questions that came up on my radio show was, when will we have a Convention of States? And my answer, after all of the interviews and everything that we did, I said, we'll have one when we have one. And they were like, what does that mean? And I said, when enough people realize what it means, the ability that they have to check the federal government back to where it should be, take their money away, put them back in the place where they always were intended to be, then there will be a Convention of States, because the people will rise up and want it. And there will be enough of us who understand the Constitution to preserve it, who will be able to get it done, and it will have a great outcome. That is my whole entire Convention of States story, and I've always been a big fan of Mark and all the guys involved.
Well, we really appreciate that. And I think that was actually a perfect answer, because that's what we need. We need the people to this is a grassroots driven process, a people driven process, because it is there in the Constitution, and right at the top of the Constitution, it says we the people. So I think your answer on that was spot on. And I also wanted to say congratulations, as you mentioned, celebrating 20 years in business and empowering moms, which I think is just absolutely wonderful. And it was something that I noticed as I was researching Moms for America, as I was preparing for this interview. And, it took me a minute, though, because I thought back to 2004. And, I grew up in New Jersey. Now, I was a political refugee to the free state of Florida here. But my dad worked in Manhattan. And so I was definitely impacted by 9/11. Thankfully, my dad was okay and in Midtown, and far away from where everything was happening. But it really impacted everyone that lived in that area. So I certainly understand where you're coming from and the feeling that your life changed that day. But still, 2004, around that time period, the culture wasn't what it is now, right? And yet I would say that you were blessed with foresight that many people lacked, because you saw that there was still going to be a need for an organization like Moms for America to be on the front lines, empowering moms to fight back and try to preserve the values that made our country great. So what was it about the culture at that time that led you to creating this organization? And are you surprised to see how much our culture has deteriorated in just the 20 years since you got started?
Well, I can tell you that I never expected us to be where we are now, and as fast as it happened. But I did see a lot of writing on the wall, and I guess my big thing was realizing how much I didn't know. I mean, I went through school. I went through in the 70s and 80s. So you'd think, gosh, I graduated in 1984. People should know in the 70s and 80s they were still taught about the Constitution, all that kind of stuff, right? Most of what I learned about American government came from Schoolhouse Rock on Saturday mornings. And we bought all those DVDs, and I showed it to all my kids. We now promote them at Moms for America. I mean, it's these simple little sound bites that showed people what America's about, the great American melting pot. I'm just a bill. The branches of, and they talked about the branches of government when I was going to school, but they never connected the principles. I don't remember ever hearing the word Constitution when I was going to school. So it was just this realization that I just didn't know what I should know as a citizen of this country. I had no idea what we had, what America was about. And it isn't just about fireworks, picnics, and parades. When you're talking about patriotism, it's about rights and responsibilities. And our responsibility, I mean, that we the people, I realized what a weighty 3 words that is. We can say it when we're mad and go, we the people, you got to listen to us. They're not going to listen to us. They're not going to listen to us if we're not actively engaged. And we don't have to give up our lives to do it, but we need to be present. We need to show up and have relationship with those people who represent us. We need to pay attention to what laws they're passing in our own communities. The president of the United States should not have as much power as the current president or the last 7 presidents have had. It has been a major shift in the way that our founding fathers our founding families really put this government together. And so when people start to realize that, and so the cottage meetings, a lot like biblical citizenship, cottage meeting project is teaching moms about the Constitution, about the principles of liberty. But we do it in a way that connects with them by connecting principles with policy. And one of the reasons why we keep losing our battles, and we'll win the war eventually, but one of the reasons why we keep losing the battles is because we're fighting principle with policy. And if we fight principle with principle, then we'll win. Freedom wins. So that's why I realized the most important thing that we do is to share the light of liberty, to share the true story of America, to help people understand what the Constitution actually is and why it matters to them. These people who are talking about the popular vote and getting rid of the electoral college. I mean, that'll be the death knell. That'll be the last bastion of a republic that we have. And people don't know that. When I ask people, they'll say something about, well, we need to repeal the 16th and 17th Amendments. And they're like, well, which ones are those? And I'm like, oh, those are the ones that take your money all the time. Take your money and take your influence. So it's these principles that people need to understand. And when I realized how much I didn't know, as I was learning it, I was getting really excited and I wanted to share it. So mom to mom messaging, mom to mom teaching, we empower them to realize just how powerful their influence is, what their rights and responsibilities are. They then get excited and they want to share it. And that's the reason why we started heavily talking about Convention of States in our cottage meetings. And it's something that we're going to be rolling in heavily next year. And here's the beauty, Jonathan, of what happened in 2020. We now have an army. It's a sitting army, and we just need to wake them up. Not wake them up to what's going on. They know. We need to wake them up to reality of their power and influence and how they can wield it effectively. Not just get mad, not just show up in a t-shirt and yell at some school board member, but actually make a difference to get America back in the place that it should be. And Convention of States is one of those solutions.
So very well said. There's so many great things that you said there, and I love the principle fighting principle instead of principle with fighting it with policy. And I think what you just said there too about 2020 is so very true. And we've spoken with Dr. Kevin Roberts on this program and some others, and I've mentioned to them, the one silver lining. There wasn't many good things that came out from COVID and everything that happened with the shutdowns, and then of course the vaccines. But the one silver lining, in my opinion, was that we were able to wake people up to what's going on with education, what's going on within the culture surrounding our children, and people don't like it, and people are fired up, and they want to do something about it. And so I'm so glad that we have organizations like Moms for America that have already been doing these things and are ready to go and kind of pick up that army. Let's wake them up, and let's get them out there and deployed and not only understanding the power that they wield, but giving them the education that, frankly, they didn't receive when they were growing up.
And, when moms get involved, it's a game changer. I'll just tell you this short little story because it's the perfect impact of what happens when moms get engaged. Our family moved to Omaha, Nebraska in 2014, and we were homeschooled. And there are no homeschools in Nebraska. There are thousands of homeschoolers, but there are no homeschools. You have to declare yourself a private school. You have to fill out a 15-page document and prove your education level and all this crazy stuff. And you have to get it notarized. And so in late 2014, the legislature was working on passing legislation that was going to make homeschooling even more draconian than it already was. And so if you know anything about homeschoolers, when they get a buzz on something, they push a button and it's like grass fire. And there was a committee hearing. We had connected with Homeschool Legal Defense Association. They wrote a letter for us on our behalf. And then they told us about the committee hearing. And so all these moms showed up. And 120, 150 people can fit in the room. Every chair was taken. They were filling the room. It was standing room only, spilling out into the hall. They brought their strollers, their kids, their Cheerios, their backpacks. There was a mom in the back nursing her baby, which I think unsettled them a little bit. And then I was sitting in the middle of the second row. And this guy sitting beside the chairman leaned over with like a deer in headlights, and he's like, "What's on the docket today?" And the chairman leaned over and said, "I don't know. All I know is whatever they want, they can have. Can have whatever they want." And it was incredible because we did. So in Nebraska now, you no longer have to fill out 15 pages. It's only like 7. You don't have to have a college degree to teach your children, and you don't have to get it notarized anymore. So when we show up, it's a game changer because we don't usually do that, and they pay attention. We just did a lobbying day in Washington D.C., and when we showed up, I mean, we had 35 moms from 17 states that showed up. We had to break out into 5 different groups because there were so many of us. And all the legislators themselves, the members of Congress themselves, were working their schedules to try and meet with us, not just their aides. And we had a major influence. It was incredible, just on a couple of bills. So this is the kind of thing we want to do in the state legislatures, is we want to get these moms mobilized to come in and start talking about the Convention of States. But to do that, they have to be well informed and knowledgeable and be able to articulate the message of why Convention of States is something that they support. So that is something that we're going to be reaching out to Mark and to a lot of our friends to get these moms trained so that they can go out and be battle ready for 2025.
Well, that would be amazing. And you're absolutely right. When moms show up and they're ready to go, things get done. And I think that would be amazing. And I want to underscore that, too, for our folks that are watching. You know, did you say you had 35 people from 17 states?
We had 35 moms from 17 states who showed up in DC.
35 moms from 17 states, right? Now, I think that's amazing. And some people might say, wow, it's only 35. You didn't have more. You didn't have 50. You didn't have 100. Just 35 moms were able to take the walls of Congress and get people to take notice. So imagine if you showed up with 35 or 50 people in your state legislature when they aren't used to seeing people like Washington, D.C., and they're not used to seeing as many media members and things of that nature. You show up with that kind of grassroots muscle, you're going to be able to get things done. And so that just thank you so much for sharing that. And I wanted to underscore that. Now, speaking of educating and making sure that you're up to date and understanding what's going on, I would bet that most of the people that are joining us tonight were also watching the vice presidential debate last night. And personally, I found it very refreshing to have a substantive debate, right? And not something where we see on national television where it's just kind of sniping back and forth and not really talking about the issues. And I think last night we really got to a number of important key issues. But I did notice that 2 of the most important culture war issues, which are school choice and education freedom, or transgenderism / women's sports, were not brought up to the candidates and were not discussed. What do you make of the fact that the media avoids discussing these issues when so many Americans are watching? Because otherwise, they like to promote these things. They like to ram them down people's throats and talking about it from one side, of course, not the other side. They only focus on advancing these priorities. So what do you make of the fact that when it comes to these important debates, when you've got 2 candidates up there and they can have an opportunity to shine one of the biggest spotlights on these issues, that they avoid them?
You know, it's a very interesting question because as a constitutional, I don't know, can you call me a constitutional scholar? It really isn't the job of the federal government. I mean, it's definitely something that we should talk about as a culture, but these are issues that need to be dealt with in the state legislature. And I wish that they would have brought them up just because things like the rights of parents, parents' rights are fundamental and supreme, protected in the Constitution of the United States, given by God. And nobody can take that away. Nobody can replace us. And we need to have that stated in every single state legal document in their constitutions or whatever. It needs to be clearly stated in their codes that parents' rights are fundamental. I don't think it would hurt to have something like that on the federal government because that is I believe, a constitutionally protected right. When it comes to school choice, I don't want the government to have anything to do with it. I don't want the federal government to have anything to do with education. I would like them to continuously say that they're going to shut down the Department of Education because that gets me excited. And they have no business in education. They never should have gotten into education because when you get the further away you get from the citizen or the child, the family, the worse and more oppressive and less educational it gets. So they're using it to indoctrinate. And if they get rid of the Department of Education, that helps a lot with the secondary issue that they're not talking about, which they should talk about. Because so one of the bills that we were promoting when we went to Washington, D.C., while we're going around every state promoting protecting girls' sports and locker rooms and bathrooms, that's really not a federal government role either. It could be a constitutional thing. Somebody needs to take a case that goes all the way to the Supreme Court, which they have. But where it does fit with the federal government is, and could make a worldwide statement, is with the Olympics. And if the federal government says only girls can compete in girls sports, if you are competing from the United States and the world, they have the ability to do that because this is a national thing, and that's one of the bills that we promoted when we went up there. So I think that we need to talk about it on a cultural issue, but I think the more that we look to the federal government to fix the problems that are cultural, the bigger the federal government's going to get, because they're always happy to gallop to the rescue and give you more government. Most of those issues need to follow on the states, but I do like it when the candidates stand up and speak common sense. Like when President Trump says, why are we talking about boys converting to girls and peeing in furry little bucket things? It's like who thought we would be talking about this? And to be able to hear where they stand, that's the reason why I wish they would have talked about it, because I would have liked to see Tim Walz squirm when he said, yeah, I think we should be prostituting kids in classrooms and shoving sex down their throats and making them unsafe in places where they should be safe. I would have loved to.
Absolutely, yeah, and I totally agree with you. We don't need the federal government involved or coming up with solutions to these issues. Frankly, if they could get away from that and out of the education business, like you said, shutting down the Department of Education, the better we will be as a country. I just find it very fascinating that they never really seem to talk about some of these important issues that are going on in the culture. Now, you mentioned cottage meetings a couple of times with what you were talking about. And
no, they don't, and they need to.
That's right. You mentioned cottage meetings in your answers before, and talking about convention of states being brought up at them. What are our cottage meetings, and how do you encourage moms to get these meetings started?
So cottage meetings are basically Tupperware for Liberty, and you just invite friends and neighbors into your home, and you lead a discussion series, and through inspiring stories, examples that you can relate to, you learn the principles of liberty, the Constitution, the story of America in a way that resonates and is relatable. And if all these moms do, and just women in general, and anybody can do it. It's not like it's not for men. Anybody can do it. We have some groups of couple groups that are doing it. We have some teachers who are doing it in their schools, in their classroom, in private schools. And churches are having meetings. So anybody can do it. But it's mom to mom messaging, and it goes to the heart. So we're not sitting there saying, okay, Article 5, Section 2. We're not talking about, we're taking the principles and we're connecting it to the Constitution, which validates and solidifies that principle within the law. And then they recognize, wait a second, they can't do what they're doing. No, they cannot. So what are you going to do about it? And then they want to know what you can do about it. So the first 12 cottage meetings, they're very mom to mom messaging, giving them the basic principles that they should have learned in school and didn't. And then following that, we have the Healing of America, which is a 16-part series and talks all about the Constitution, but again, from principle based, why we even have a Constitution, the history of the Constitution, why the Constitution was dismantled, what the threats to it, and how do we repair it. And moms love this because they're like, oh my gosh, I can now go and I can articulate. There was a mom in Florida, and then we hear this all the time that it's life changing. But one of the moms in Florida reached out a couple years ago, and we hear these comments a lot. And she said, I was having a conversation with my state representative about a constitutional principle, and he asked me if I could slow down so he could take notes. So the Constitution is pretty simple. The principles make sense. And when you share them and you give them the information to these moms, they become powerhouses and they're able to battle this. And if all they do is meet once a month, by the end of the year, they'll have more knowledge and understanding on the principles of liberty and the Constitution. than the majority of judges, elected representatives, and attorneys in this country. And we have mountains of anecdotal evidence to prove it. These mamas are winning battles and sometimes wars in their own communities just by sitting down and having a conversation. We had a group of moms that went and sat down with the mayor, and they were talking. He was all for this educational policy that they were pushing, and they were sat down with him for a half an hour, 35 minutes. And as they were leaving, he's like, you know what? I didn't even think about this. I'm gonna have to change my position. He was he was he was totally turned around, and he's like, how do you ladies know this? And one of the moms turned around and said, cottage meetings. It's just kind of cute.
That is awesome. And it just shows, again, the power of moms and coming together as patriots and really having conversations and empowering each other so that this way you know that you don't have to go and do these things alone. Now, Kimberly, we've got a couple of great questions from our audience, so I want to go to those. This is a friend of mine from New Jersey, Jim Collinsworth, wrote in, and he said, does Moms for America have a New Jersey chapter? I would like to have someone speak at my monthly COS meeting. So if folks wanted to see if there is a chapter in their state or a representative in their state that could perhaps they could get connected with, how would they get that information?
So here's a really cool thing. We have a very unique feature at Moms for America. If you contact us, we respond. So when you go to the contact page, there is the form, but there's also a direct email, a direct phone number, and Maria is the one who answers it. She always responds. If you just say, we want to have one of your moms come, or do you have I want to say that it doesn't really matter in general, but I do want to make it clear that we do not have chapters. We have groups. Autonomous groups. When you have chapters, it's top down, and we are a bottom up organization. That when they, the leadership that you always think are at the top, and then you work things down, it's just the opposite. We're at the bottom, holding up everybody, and there's layers holding up and serving all the moms across the country. So they're Moms for America groups, they're autonomous groups, and if there isn't one in your area, we have one close enough. We've got some great moms right across the border in Pennsylvania. We have some in Virginia. So if there aren't, and honestly, I can't keep up. They're just coming like in droves, and I can't keep up with how many there are. So we can definitely provide you a speaker for your group.
That's awesome. And thank you so much for clarifying that. I think language is important, so we want to make sure that we get that right. It is groups that are available. And I also love the structure of your organization where it is a bottom-up organization and you're serving everyone. That's how Convention of States is set up as well. So thank you for that clarification. Heather Pastor wrote in and said, how is Moms for America combating the woke agenda in our schools?
Wow, that's a loaded question. Okay, well, we do it through legislation, through litigation, and relationships. So the relationships, we have something called Family Lobby, and we encourage moms to connect with those who represent them and do it as a family. So as an example, we encourage them to write 5 letters. And thank you notes, 5 thank you notes. Whenever you start, just write 5 thank you notes to your state senator, your state representative, your sheriff, whoever represents you on the school board, and however your city or county is represented, your county supervisor or your city council member, and send a thank you note. Thank them for their service, whether you think they're schmucks or not, whether you voted for them or not, whether you want them to go or not. It doesn't matter. Positive reinforcement works. We know that because we tell our kids, thank you for making your bed, they run and make their bed. So we want them to, if you just come in angry and the only time they see you is when you're upset with them, how much are they going to listen to you? But if you create a relationship with them, so after you write that thank you note, you put in a picture of your family and you put in something the kids did, handprints or something. And we encourage them to put in a copy of the Declaration of Mothers. Thank you so much for protecting our families and serving in the community. We're so grateful for you. We just put in a Declaration of Mothers so you know what we care about. And then you can heart attack, do it several times throughout the year. Heart attack them at Valentine's Day. Find out when their birthday is and send them a birthday card. If it's someone close, like your school board member, take them out to lunch. Ask them what they think about some of the things that you're finding and ask their opinion. As we're doing this, what's happening is these school board members, there are a lot more that are with us than against us, but there are associations. And this is one of the things we do is educate. There are associations, not just the National School Board Association, but every state has an affiliate. And then there's this Principals Association and the state School Board Association, and then there's the Log Workers Association, Superintendents Association, and they're all lobbying associations that are basically under the arm of the teachers unions, and they're funded by our own tax dollars. Our own money that's going into the school districts is paying thousands and thousands of dollars when we're trying to get tissues and pencils. So we inform moms, we educate them and inform them on this, and then they're able to go in and articulate this. And we're encouraging them to get FOIAs, public record requests. We have a form they can fill out to ask how much money is going to these associations, how much of our district funds are going to these associations, and then going to the school district and telling them, did you know that this amount of money is going to this? And they're all lobbying, and they're all about getting these school board members to be quiet and silent. So once we start reaching out and creating these relationships, school board members are now actually reaching out to our moms and asking them their opinion on something while the discussion is still on the table, instead of ignoring them and after the decision is made. Litigation and legislation. Legislation, we have the FCC standard bill, and it doesn't have FCC anywhere in the bill. We just call it that because we go and we find bills in each state, or we find someone to put one forth, and we have a model bill that we can use that follows the FCC standard. It's already been decided that children should not be subject to obscene material. If you can't show it on TV and you can't hear it on the radio, you can't have it in the classroom. And so we've been able to pass that in 3 states, Texas, Virginia, and Louisiana. And it's now in 14 states. California, it didn't get very far, but we were surprised it got as far as it did. But so 14 states, it was 15. So we're doing that on the legislative side, and we're always looking for legislation that's going to protect our kids, protect the safe spaces, that kind of thing. And then on litigation, when we need to, we file lawsuits, and we have, I think, 7 different legal firms that we use that are all pro bono. And they've been great. Goldwater Institute, Alliance Defending Freedom, several of them, and they've been wonderful taking some of these cases. And when it's a case that they can't take, then we find a local lawyer, and sometimes it's as simple as a letter. They don't like to have legal letters dropped on them, and they don't like to be called out on social media. And we're very tactful when we use the social media platform. We just ask questions. We don't say, oh, there's a horrible person, look what they did. We just say, do you think that this is appropriate to have in the classroom? Because 3 of our school board members think so. And suddenly you have an army of moms that show up at the school board and go, I'm sorry, what? So that's what we do. Relationships, litigation, legislation.
Amazing. And y'all are doing just amazing work with Moms for America. And Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us tonight to tell us about it. Again, folks, if you want to check them out, go to momsforamerica.us. And you heard from Kimberly. Feel free to contact them. They will respond to you and get you connected so you can be involved with this organization. And I have to say, Kimberly, I'm really excited that we're going to be able to work more closely with you and have some amazing moms showing up at the Capitol with our grassroots activists with Convention of States. And I'm confident that we're going to have some major, major success because of all of your hard work and all of the help that you give to us. So thank you so much for being here.
You are so welcome. I told Mark it is time, and it's definitely time. We have the army. Let's get the mamas mobilized.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Kimberly. God bless. Well, just an amazing conversation. What an amazing organization. So definitely give them a look, folks. And we'll be excited to see them joining us in the Capitol starting up next year. Okay, now it's time for Action at Home. Okay, so as I mentioned before, tonight we have a 2-for-1 regarding actions you can take to advance the Convention of States movement from the comfort of your home. First, we want to introduce you to the Save Their America campaign. Check it out.
I'm out on the road and I ask COS volunteers why they donate their time, why they're putting in their talents, why they spend their money supporting Convention of States, they almost always bring up their kids or their grandkids. You know, and I realized when I fight to save America, I'm not so much fighting for myself. It's not about us. It's about saving their America, saving America for our kids, for our grandkids, for other people. That means something. And that's why we're asking Convention of States supporters like you, why are you fighting for COS? So what I need you to do is to record a short video of yourself with your smartphone. Simple, no production stuff. Just tell us from the heart, who are you fighting for? Upload that to conventionofstates.com/upload. You know, you can also post that video, same exact video, to social media. Use the hashtag #SaveTheirAmerica. This is about what kind of America we're leaving for the future. So record that video. Join us at conventionofstates.com/upload.
Yeah, that's a really important thing that we're doing, and we would love for your help with this, because stories really matter, right? And when we're talking to our grassroots activists and encouraging them to get out there and bring people in, we encourage them to share their story. Why are you doing this? What is your why? You know, you can talk about the how or the what. Why are you involved with Convention of States? Why are you doing everything that you can? Why are you supporting Convention of States? So please record a video, like Mark said, and add it to the collection that we're building here with Save Their America campaign, and it will help us make a difference as we try to extend the message of Convention of States more broadly. Now, the second thing that I wanted to mention is something we've discussed before, and that is joining the Convention of States team. And the reason why this is important is because, as you may have heard, there is an election coming up, not just one election, of course, a number of elections. And as always, Convention of States is paying attention to the local and state elections, and we're going to try to get involved in those as much as we possibly can. And starting up this weekend, we're going to be doing texting campaigns and phone campaigns into key states to get people out to vote, or to encourage them to vote for specific candidates that will be Convention of States champions. So go on over to conventionofstates.com/phone team to learn more. You can sign up to either become a Patriot volunteer or sign up to become a volunteer activist. We will get you onto our texting team if that's what you'd like to join, or if you'd like to help us in making phone calls, which are vitally important, and they make such a huge difference when you're able to connect with someone over the phone. You can sign up and become a Patriot volunteer, and we'll provide you with that training. Again, we're getting started this Saturday. Now is a great time to get involved. Go on over to conventionofstates.com/phone team and sign up today. Okay, let's go ahead and check the Minutemen mailbag. All right, we have a great question, as always, in mailbag. Y'all are amazing. Put together some incredible questions, and I love them. And this one was just perfect based on the theme for tonight and the conversation that we just had with Kimberly Fletcher. William McCord wrote in asking, what, if any, is COS's long-range strategy for loosening the NEA's stranglehold on public school education? Well, William, that is a great question again, and thank you so much, because it's important that we talk about the influence that the federal government and unions like the National Education Association have on our educational system and what they've done, and that is they've devastated our country's educational system. So instead of teaching our children how to think, public schools are nothing more than indoctrination mills that push social justice and radical poisonous ideologies like critical race theory and gender theory. We were just talking about the woke agenda with Kimberly Fletcher. We also had conversations last month with Superintendent Ryan Walters in Oklahoma. It's out of control what is being done, and that's because of the federal government and its influence on what is being taught in the states. So how can Convention of States be a part of the solution? What are some of the things that we're doing? Well, COS is already taking steps to fight back against the politicization of schools. As Kimberly was talking about with Moms for America, we also are getting involved with what we call F3 legislation. Now, this is legislation that is not directly related to COS, but aligns with our core values and impacts freedom, federalism, and fundamental rights within a state. So we've been focusing on F3 legislation in some of our states where we've already passed the resolution, and we support legislation that promotes education freedom, including legislation to establish or expand education savings accounts. We did this in Oklahoma. We supported it. We supported it in Georgia, in Texas, and also in Florida, here, my home state. We've also supported legislation that's been anti-CRT or DEI indoctrination that's being pushed on children in schools, again, fighting back against the politicization. We've also supported legislation that tries to get the gender theory out of schools and doesn't come down on teachers for using incorrect pronouns. So we've been doing that in states like Louisiana, and the anti-CRT bill I know was in Alabama and other states as well. We've also supported curriculum transparency legislation. There's no reason why states or school boards need to hide what's going on and what's being taught to your children. So we want to make sure that that's out there. This is all stuff that we have supported already with Convention of States. We've also been involved in various school board races by conducting candidate surveys that are shared with voters so that they know where these school board candidates stand on vitally important issues. Many school board races are nonpartisan, right? So without necessarily seeing somebody associated with a political party, your average normal voter goes to the booth and sees a person's name, and unless they've gotten literature or happen to have conversations with these candidates, they don't know where they stand on these issues. And that's where Convention of States has gotten involved, and we've created candidate surveys to let people, to get candidates to answer these questions, and then we go out and we disperse the results from these candidate surveys in as many ways as possible. We do it through phone banking, with our Telepatriot tool that I mentioned before, peer-to-peer texting as well. We try to get the word out to as wide of an audience as possible so people are educated before they go to the polls. Lastly, there are a few ways we can address the federal government's influence at a convention, right? One way is that we can pose term limits on federal bureaucrats, which would weaken the influence these departments have over the states, right? We saw Chevron deference was overturned by the Supreme Court, and that's an important thing because we had these government agencies, these bureaucracies, interpreting law that was created in Congress, these laws that were not clear. The agencies were able to take it and decide exactly what they wanted it to mean, right? And that's ridiculous. And that's kind of the power that they have. Now, even though Chevron deference has been overturned, many of these bureaucracies are so entrenched with career bureaucrats. You know, think of somebody like an Anthony Fauci that's been there forever. I know he's on now, but these are the type of bureaucrats that are still there, and their influence is incredibly strong. Well, we want to term limits on them and prevent them from having that type of influence. So that's one way that we can combat it. Of course, the other way is under our size and scope plank, where we could define in the Constitution that the federal government has no jurisdiction over education within the states, completely abolish the Department of Education, like Kimberly Fletcher was talking about, and this will allow states to make decisions on education, thus moving those important decisions even closer to the people. All of that is within Convention of States' scope, and that's what we are doing. So thank you, William, for that very important question, because let's face it, folks, education and the future of our country really comes down to this issue, because and it's also important to the mission of Convention of States, because as Abraham Lincoln once said, the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next, right? So we see the type of government that we've gotten recently, and that's because we, the people, have failed to ensure that the philosophy of the schoolroom reflects the Judeo-Christian values our country was founded on. So it's time for us to change that. We need to be involved at all of the different levels of the education battle, from local on level all the way up to state and at the federal level, and do our part as American citizens to make sure that the philosophy of the schoolroom reflects the values that made our country so great. Again, thank you so much, William, for that amazing question. And if you would like to submit a question for us, go on over to conventionofstates.com/mailbag, send it over to the Minutemen mailbag, and we would love to read your question on the air and hopefully provide you with an answer. Okay, let's go ahead now and move on to COS Voices. All right. right, so this is the segment of the program that I've talked about a couple of times, and we created this because we wanted to answer one of the top questions that we receive at Convention of States. So many people hear about it, and they hear about Article 5 and what we're trying to do, and they say, well, it's not easy for us to package this question or an answer to this question succinctly. Like, how can we communicate it quickly and on the fly? And what steps, or how would you recommend that we do that? Well, thankfully, we've got amazing grassroots activists that have been doing this and have done this and have even recorded it. And that's what we have here tonight. We will hear from one of our amazing activists to demonstrate exactly how you can communicate the COS message quickly. And tonight we will hear from Todd Lund from New Jersey.
We have to work with everyday people, stay within our budget, and take care of our families and communities. But those guys in Washington, many haven't worked a real job in a decade. They blow their budgets, racking up trillions in debt, and can't keep their hands out of my life. But there's a way to fix this. 19 states have called for an Article 5 Convention of the States to propose amendments to the Constitution, ones that actually limit the politicians in D.C. So if you want to join the 2 million other folks like us calling for this convention, sign this petition.
Man, that was perfectly done by Todd. So see, as you can see, there are ways that you can package this important movement that we have into a short, succinct message and communicate that to folks. So thank you, Todd, so much. And folks, that's it. We've reached the conclusion of another program, and I want to thank you so very much for joining us. And just as a reminder, all of the COS at Home shows are aired live on the first Wednesday of every month at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Sometimes we don't necessarily get our guests on live, but we were blessed to have Kimberly Fletcher join us live tonight, and it is always exciting because we want to interact with you and give you the opportunity to ask some important questions of our guests. So our next show is going to be on Wednesday, November 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern. According to my calendar, let me just double check this here. Yes, okay, so our next show is going to be on November 6th, which is post-Armageddon, otherwise known as the day after the 2024 election, right? So that means that this is going to be an occasion where we're going to want to take a look at what has happened, what has transpired. Hopefully we'll have results from that election, because some states apparently can't count the votes the night of the election. But hopefully by the time you join us Wednesday evening, we'll have the results and we'll be able to communicate them to you. But I won't be able to do that by myself. We have to bring out some of the heavy hitters of COS to recap what has gone on. So joining us will be Mark Meckler, the president of Convention of States, the COS senior advisor, Senator Rick Santorum, and our vice president of legislative affairs, Rita Peters. Really looking forward to sitting down with all three of them to discuss what the results mean for our nation, as well as what the state and local races mean for Convention of States as we go into 2025 and beyond. So join us again Wednesday, November 6th, 8 o'clock Eastern for our post-2024 election analysis. I promise we will still be here and things will not have burned down, but we will be here to walk you through it and talk about it and so much more. Ladies and gentlemen, as I've always mentioned, this show is a lot of fun, and I hope that you have enjoyed the show and have had as much fun as I have. Thanks again to Kimberly Fletcher for joining us tonight. A big thanks, as always, to my dear friend, the legendary producer G, for all of his work behind the scenes and all of the amazing things that he is able to do for us. But as I always say, and I mean this, folks, it's not just a line at the end of the program. The greatest thanks goes to all of you, because you are the ones out there in the trenches, doing the hard work, getting things done, showing up like the folks from Moms for America. You're showing up at capitals and legislatures across the country to advance the Convention of States mission. You're holding those meetings. You're getting out there and talking with legislators. And it's important to remember that despite all the problems we currently face in our country, despite all of the turmoil surrounding elections and the agita that we may feel about not knowing who's going to win and who's going to be in charge of our country, at the end of the day, you and I, we the people, are the solution. So all of the problems that we face, you and I can be the solution. We get things done because, as I mentioned before, at the very top of the Constitution, it says we the people. So you and I are the way forward for our country. And so thank you so much for being here and supporting us. I wish you all a wonderful evening. God bless you. And again, please continue to pray and support all of the people that are impacted from Hurricane Helene. We lift all of them up in prayer, and please continue to support them. Thank you so much, everyone. God bless you, and good night.